Hello everyone, and welcome back to Chill English Channel. We're really glad you're here with us today, taking a small pause from your busy life to relax, learn something useful, and improve your English in a calm and simple way. I'm Sophia.
And I'm Jake. It's always great to have you here. Whether you're starting your day, taking a break, or just looking for something helpful to listen to, we're happy you chose to learn with us.
And today, we're going to talk about something that many people struggle with, even if they don't always realize it.
That's right. Today's topic is stop waiting for the right time.
This is something that sounds simple,
But in real life, it's not always easy.
because many people spend a lot of time waiting,
Waiting to feel ready,
waiting for the perfect moment,
waiting for the right conditions.
and sometimes waiting for motivation.
Yes, and that perfect moment often never comes.
Exactly. And because of that, people delay important things in their lives.
Things like learning a new skill,
Starting a project.
or even making a small change in their daily habits.
So before we go deeper, let's ask a simple question.
What does it mean to wait for the right time?
It means delaying action because you believe a better moment will come later,
A moment when everything feels easier,
when you feel more confident
more prepared.
or more motivated.
But the problem is that moment is often imaginary,
It's something we think will happen.
but it rarely does.
Let's take a simple example.
Imagine you want to start learning English seriously,
You tell yourself, I'll start next week.
or I'll start when I have more time.
Or even, I'll start when I feel ready.
But then next week comes,
And nothing changes.
you still feel busy,
You still feel unsure.
you still unsure.
And you delay it again.
That's how waiting becomes a habit.
And that habit can stop your progress. Let me ask you something, Jake.
Okay, I'm ready.
Have you ever waited for the right time to do something?
Honestly, yes, many times.
Can you give an example?
Sure. There were times when I wanted to start a project, but I kept telling myself I needed more time or better conditions.
And what happened?
I delayed it for weeks, sometimes even months.
That sounds very familiar.
Yes. And the interesting thing is, the situation never became perfect.
So what made you finally start?
I realized that waiting wasn't helping me. I just needed to begin, even if everything wasn't ready.
That's a very important realization.
Yes, because once I started, I understood that the right time is something you create.
Not something you wait for.
Exactly.
So, let's begin with our first important idea.
Way number 1. The perfect time doesn't exist.
This is something that can change the way you think.
Many people believe that one day everything will be perfect,
They imagine a moment when they feel completely ready,
when they have enough time,
enough energy.
enough confidence.
But real life doesn't work that way.
There will always be something missing,
Maybe you don't have enough time,
or you feel tired,
or you feel unsure about what to do.
and that's normal.
If you wait for perfect conditions, you may wait forever.
That's why it's important to change your mindset.
Instead of asking, is this the right time?
Ask, what can I do right now?
That question leads to action.
And action is what creates progress.
Let's take another example.
Imagine someone wants to start exercising,
They might say, I'll start when I have more energy.
or I'll start next month,
But the truth is, they can start today.
even with a small step.
Maybe just 5 minutes.
Maybe just one simple exercise.
It doesn't have to be perfect.
It just has to begin.
So the first idea is very clear,
Don't wait for perfect conditions.
because they don't exist.
Instead, focus on what is possible now.
Now let's move to another important idea.
Way number 2, start before you feel ready.
This can feel uncomfortable at first.
Because we like to feel prepared.
We like to feel confident,
But in many cases, readiness comes after you start.
not before.
Let's think about it this way.
Imagine you want to speak English more confidently.
If you wait until you feel confident,
You may never start speaking,
because confidence comes from practice,
and practice requires action,
so you need to begin even if you feel unsure,
even if you make mistakes.
even if it feels uncomfortable.
That's part of the process.
Let me ask you something, Sophia.
Sure.
Do you always feel ready before you start something new?
Not really. Most of the time, I feel a little unsure at the beginning.
That's interesting.
But I've learned that it's okay to feel that way.
So what do?
I start anyway, even if I don't feel fully ready.
And what happens after you start?
Usually, I feel more comfortable after a few minutes.
So again, action creates confidence,
Exactly.
not the other way around.
Let's connect these ideas together.
The perfect time doesn't exist.
And you don't need to feel ready to start,
These two ideas are very powerful when combined.
because they remove the biggest barrier.
Waiting.
And once you stop waiting,
You begin to move forward.
but there's still one more important idea we need to explore here.
Because even if you understand this,
You might still feel resistance,
you might still delay starting.
and that's completely normal.
Now, we're going to explore why starting feels so difficult sometimes, and how you can make it much easier to take that first step, even on days when everything feels a little difficult or uncertain.
Because understanding something is one thing, but actually doing it in real life is something completely different.
And that's where many people struggle the most.
Not because they don't know what to do, but because starting feels uncomfortable or even stressful.
So, let's explore that idea a little more deeply. Way number 3. Understand why starting feels difficult.
Many people believe they don't start because they're lazy.
But in most cases, that's not true at all.
Starting usually feels hard because something feels unclear, too big, or overwhelming.
Or sometimes because we're afraid of making mistakes.
Or afraid that the result won't be good enough.
Let's take a simple example.
Imagine you want to begin a new project or learn something new.
But you're not sure how to do it correctly
So instead of starting, you delay.
because you want to avoid doing it wrong.
That's very common.
Yes, and it shows that the problem is not laziness
It's uncertainty,
or pressure.
or even fear.
And when you understand the real reason behind your delay, you can start to deal with it more effectively.
Let me ask you something, Jake.
Sure.
What usually makes starting feel difficult for you personally?
For me, it's when something feels too big or not clearly defined.
That makes sense.
If I don't know exactly where to begin, I feel stuck and I delay taking action.
And what do you usually do in that situation?
I try to make the tasks smaller and more specific.
That's a very useful strategy.
Yes, because once I understand the first step clearly, starting becomes much easier. And that connects directly to our next idea. Way number 4, make the first step extremely small.
This is one of the most practical and effective strategies you can use.
Because large tasks naturally create resistance,
They feel heavy, complex, and difficult.
and your brain tries to avoid that discomfort.
So instead of thinking about the entire task, you focus only on the smallest possible step.
For example, don't say, "I will finish this whole project today,"
Say, I will work on it for 5 minutes.
or even something simpler like, "I will open my notebook and look at the first page."
That feels much easier and less stressful.
And when something feels easy, you are much more likely to begin.
And once you begin, something important happens.
You build momentum,
And that momentum helps you continue naturally.
because the hardest part is usually just getting started.
Let's take another simple example.
Imagine you want to build a habit of reading.
Instead of saying, I will read for 1 hour every day,
You can say, "I will read 1 page,"
that feels very manageable.
and it removes the pressure.
And very often, after reading 1 page, you feel comfortable continuing.
Because you've already started.
And starting changes everything.
So remember this important idea.
Don't focus on completing everything at once.
Focus on beginning with something small.
That small beginning is what creates progress. Now let's move to another important idea that many people don't notice.
Because sometimes the problem is not the task itself.
but the way we think about it.
Way number 5. Take action before overthinking.
Overthinking is one of the biggest reasons people delay starting.
Yes, because when we think too much, we often create unnecessary problems in our mind.
We imagine difficulties that are not even real yet.
We start asking too many questions.
Like, what if I fail?
What if I'm not good enough?
What if this doesn't work?
And all of that thinking creates hesitation.
And hesitation leads to inaction.
So, instead of thinking for too long, you take action quickly, before your mind has time to create excuses.
Yes, because our mind is very creative when it comes to excuses.
Let's imagine a situation,
You want to start studying or working on something.
but you start thinking, maybe I should rest first.
Maybe I don't have enough time.
Maybe I'll start later.
And suddenly you don't start at all.
So, what can you do differently?
You act quickly.
One simple method is to count down.
For example, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
And then you begin immediately,
This reduces overthinking.
and helps you move into action.
Let me ask you something, Jake.
Go ahead.
Do you sometimes overthink before starting something?
Yes, definitely. Sometimes I spend more time thinking about doing something than actually doing it.
That's very common.
And I've noticed that the more I think, the more difficult it becomes to start.
So what helps you in those situations?
Starting quickly before I give myself time to create excuses.
That's a very practical approach.
Yes, because action breaks the cycle of overthinking. Now, let's connect these ideas together. First, understand that starting feels difficult because of uncertainty or fear.
Second, make the first step extremely small and simple.
Third, take action before overthinking takes control.
These ideas work together to reduce resistance.
And make it easier to begin even when you don't feel ready.
Let's imagine a real situation to make this clearer.
You have something important to do, like studying or working on a goal.
In the past, you might wait for the right time.
But now you approach it differently.
You don't wait.
You don't overthink.
You choose one small action.
And you begin immediately.
That small decision changes everything.
Because now you are taking control instead of waiting.
And once you start practicing this regularly, something interesting begins to happen.
Starting no longer feels as difficult as before,
Not because the tasks have changed.
but because your approach and your thinking have changed.
And over time, you begin to notice that waiting feels less natural, while taking action becomes something you do more easily and more automatically in your daily life.
Yes, and that's a very important change.
Because now, instead of asking yourself, when is the right time to start,
You begin to ask a different question.
what can I do right now?
And that question leads directly to action.
Which is exactly what creates progress.
Let's take a moment to explore this idea a little more deeply.
Because many people believe that starting is the hardest part.
But in reality, the hardest part is often deciding to start.
Once that decision is made, everything becomes a little easier.
Even if the task itself is still challenging.
And that's why changing your mindset is so important.
Instead of waiting for the perfect moment,
You begin to create your own moment.
through action.
Let me ask you something, Jake.
Sure.
Do you think people realize how much time they lose by waiting?
Honestly, I don't think so.
Why do you say that?
Because waiting feels comfortable.
That's true.
When you wait, you avoid discomfort.
You avoid uncertainty.
And you avoid the possibility of making mistakes.
But at the same time,
You also avoid progress.
that's a very important point.
Yes, because while you are waiting, nothing really changes.
Your situation stays the same,
Your skills stay the same.
and your goals remain unfinished.
So, in a way, waiting has a cost.
And that cost is time.
And time is something we can't get back.
Let's think about this in a simple way.
Imagine you wait one day to start something.
That might not seem like a big problem.
But then that one day becomes 2 days.
then a week,
then a month,
and suddenly a lot of time has passed.
and nothing has changed.
That's why starting now is so important.
Even if it's just a small step,
Now let's take a moment to bring everything together.
because we've talked about several important ideas in this episode.
And when you connect them, they form a very practical system.
A system that helps you take action instead of waiting.
Let's review them clearly.
Way number 1. The perfect time doesn't exist.
If you wait for perfect conditions, you may wait forever.
Way number 2. Start before you feel ready.
Because readiness often comes after you begin, not before.
Way number 3. Understand why starting feels difficult.
It's usually not laziness, but uncertainty, fear, or pressure.
Way number 4. Make the first step extremely small.
Because small steps reduce resistance and make it easier to begin.
Way number 5. Take action before overthinking.
Because overthinking creates delay, while action creates momentum.
These 5 ideas are simple, but they are very powerful when you use them consistently.
Let's imagine how this works in real life.
You have something important to do.
In the past, you might wait,
You might say, I'll do it later.
or I'm not ready yet.
But now you think differently.
You remind yourself that the perfect time doesn't exist,
You choose a small step,
and you begin immediately,
even if you feel unsure.
even if you don't feel fully prepared.
That action creates movement.
And that movement creates progress,
Over time, those small actions begin to build something bigger.
confidence,
Experience.
and consistency,
And once you have those, starting becomes easier.
because you trust yourself more.
And that's a very important result.
Now let's talk a little about how you can express these ideas in English.
Because this is also an English learning lesson.
Here's a useful sentence pattern.
I used to wait for blank, but now I blank.
For example, I used to wait for the right time, but now I start immediately.
Another example, I used to wait until I felt ready, but now I take small steps.
That's a great way to describe change.
Here's another useful pattern.
One small step I can take today is blank.
For example, one small step I can take today is studying for 10 minutes.
These sentences are simple but very useful.
And they help you talk about real-life situations.
Let's try a short conversation.
Okay,
Do you still wait for the right time?
not really. I try to start even when I don't feel ready.
What helps you do that?
I focus on small steps and take action quickly.
That sounds very natural.
And very practical.
Now let's take a moment to reflect.
Think about your own life.
What are you waiting for?
Is there something you've been delaying,
Something you want to start?
but haven't started yet?
Now ask yourself this question.
What is one small step I can take today?
Not tomorrow,
Not next week.
today.
Because action always begins in the present moment.
Before we finish, remember this.
You don't need the perfect time,
You don't need perfect conditions.
and you don't need to feel completely ready,
You just need to begin.
even with one small step.
Because that small step can change everything. Now it's your turn.
We have a question for you.
What is something you have been waiting to start?
And what small step will you take today?
You can write your answer like this.
I have been waiting to blank, but today I will blank.
Write your answer in the comments.
We really enjoy reading your responses.
And it's a great way to practice your English. If you found this lesson helpful, don't forget to like this video.
And share it with someone who might need a reminder to start.
Also, subscribe to Chill English channel.
Your support helps us continue creating calm and useful lessons for you.
And for learners all around the world.
Keep practicing a little every day.
Stay consistent.
And remember,
You don't have to wait.
you just have to start.
Step by step.
See you in the next lesson.
Goodbye, everyone.